I've had my 2016 model Grand Design Reflection 29RS for 4 seasons now, and in those 4 seasons I've done quite a few modifications and updates, some of which were off-the-shelf items. However, quite a few of them I custom made myself, so essentially I invented them. I'll post a link here for the original walkthrough video that I did 4 years ago when I bought the RV before I did any modifications. That'll allow you to compare what I've done. And most of these projects do have separate videos, as well as I have a website that contains additional information on the project. So I encourage you to go to my website, rv-project.com, and you can do all of them yourself, even the custom built ones. And so we'll start off here with the MORryde pin box, and this pin box has little rubber dampeners in it that will reduce the shock of going down the road, the so-called chucking that fifth wheels can get. And it's not perfect, but it does help. Next, I installed a 4-channel Furrion Vision S backup camera. I have a camera in the back, 2 side cameras, and it came with a 4th camera to put over the door. Well, I didn't really care about the door, so I actually custom built this housing, 3D printed it, and now I can use it as a hitch cam, or I can locate it anywhere that I want as long as I have 12-volt power. And when I get set up at a site, I can take the monitor out of the truck, power it by 12 volts inside the RV, and so now I have a camera to monitor the outside 24/7. One of the future updates I would like to do is to redesign the housing to hold lithium batteries. That way it'll be truly portable and I don't even have to have a power cable. And the light fixture you see here is what I call my Cylon Eye. If you're familiar with the old series Battlestar Galactica, you know what the Cylon Eye is. Or if you watch the old Knight Rider television series, Kit the car had the same thing. Originally this was a clear plastic bezel, where the one I have now is black. Well, only after 12 months in the moderate Michigan sunlight, the thing yellowed. When I replaced it, I decided, well, let's be a little bit silly and we'll add some functions to it. And the funny thing is it started out being silly, but actually became quite useful. And in the default mode, it's basically just a work light to help you hitch at night. And this is Arduino powered, if you know what that is. I also added an accelerometer, which basically is a leveling device, and green shows that it's level, and if it was not level, the light would go to one side or the other, showing which one is low, and it would turn red. And in this position, this is where the idea Cylon Eye comes from. It allows you to see the pin box at night so you do not walk into it. And in the last position, it goes through a cycling of different patterns. It's just kind of a demo thing. And after breaking off 2 plastic ones, I installed the stainless steel hatch clip. This one has not broken yet. In the front storage compartment, I added a DC bus. I have switches for a TPMS repeater, that's a tire pressure monitoring system repeater, and a courtesy light that I can turn on white or blue that is under the nose of the RV. And also the on-off switch for the hitch cam. And below that is a battery charge state monitor, and I'll explain how that works more when we get inside, because I also replicated inside. And moving to the right, I have a LevelMate Pro that I installed, and I also found some rubber clips and fashion brackets so that I can mount the tire and the jack crank handles. I have a battery watering system so that you don't have to take the battery cover off. You just take the end of that hose, stick it into a bucket of distilled water, depress the bulb a few times, and it will top off your batteries. And I also have a Steadifast jack stabilizer system. Now originally I did order JT Strong Arms, but there is not a frame member underneath where I had to install them. I would have had to add about 20 pounds worth of steel structure members to be able to mount that. And the beauty of this one is I don't need to install that because it spans both landing gear. And this is what I refer to as the wet bay. This is where the Nautilus One system is at. Now immediately below the Nautilus panel is where the cable pull tank valves used to be. And anybody with those cable pull tank valves know that it's hard to open and close, and sometimes it's just hard for them to work. Well, the problem is that I discovered is that the RV manufacturers are not installing them correctly. They're bending them too sharp. They're not shortening them like they should. They just slap slap them in there and call it good. Well, eventually I became tired of that, so I upgraded my tank valves to Barker Electric Auto Valves, and now the valves, instead of being on a cable system, are electrically controlled by a motor, so I can open and close each valve by just depressing a switch. Much better system. And the Barker valves do come with a switch. However, I didn't have sufficient place to locate them in my wet bay, so I custom made the switch panel, and I use Carling Contour switches which have IP68 ingress protection, so even if they get wet, the switches aren't going to be compromised. And the next problem I tackled is to correct the malfunctioning tank level monitors. And any of you that have tank level monitors here, you know they just don't work. They're not accurate at all, or if they were accurate, they last about as long as you drive the RV off the lot. Well, I installed a C-level 4-channel tank monitor system, and I actually have two displays, one here in the wet bay and then one in the main console, which I'll show you later. And for this one, I modified it by adding an on-off switch, and this monitoring system uses capacitive reading sensors that are external to the tank, so they just can't get fouled. And the water pump is actually right behind this wet bay, and I discovered that the fuse for the water pump was just laying next to the water pump. So if you ever blew the fuse, you have to take everything out of the storage compartment, take down a wall to get to the fuse. Well, that's kind of stupid. So I replaced the fuse with a circuit breaker, which is fine for a motor, and I custom made this bezel, so now I have the breaker on the outside, so if it ever pops, it's going to be a lot easier to reset. And also I have a water leak monitor, and I'll explain more how that works when we get inside. I custom design and build it, and it can handle up to 9 sensors. One of the sensors is right behind this panel. So this is where one of the high leak areas can occur in these RVs, because there's tons of fittings behind here for all the valves, and you know they didn't do necessarily a perfect job with installing it. And in fact, one of the fittings, I probably should replace it, but I have to go in and hand tighten it about once a year. And on this side, I found a little holder that I can put a wrench and screwdriver, slide out lube, and liquid wrench RV silicone. And then I custom printed with my 3D printer a little storage compartment for the Lippert wireless remote that I also installed for the Ground Control 3.0 leveling system. I also installed a bayonet mounting valve on the end of the sewer hose fitting, because the design of the trailer is such that we have about 8 foot of nearly level plumbing on the inside going between all the tanks. It takes a long time for that to drain out, and then even when you drain it, you go down the road, you know, the trailer goes back and forth a little bit. Anything that's left will go down to the end of the drain, and then the next time you open this, you'll get a shower, and you don't want that kind of a shower. With the valve on the end here, this just prevents that from happening. Continuing on, there's one of the backup cameras for the driver's side rear view, and also I upgraded the axles and springs. This 29RS in 2016 came with 4,400-pound axles and springs and 10-inch brakes. In 2017, the factory upgraded to 5,200-pound axles and springs and 12-inch brakes. And since I live in Michigan and the roads are horrible, I was very concerned that one of the springs could snap off. So actually I upgraded these to the 5,200-pound ones at my own expense. We were towing this through Massachusetts a couple years ago on the toll road, and this is after I upgraded the axles and springs. I hit a pothole so hard that it turned the radio on in the truck. And last year I changed out the Westlake tires, the so-called China bombs, to Goodyear Endurance, which are made in the USA, and they seem to be a lot better tire. And we installed slide toppers on all of the slide outs because I got tired of blowing the tops off with a leaf blower. I also installed a Flagpole Buddy ladder mount flagpole mount, so they can either attach a 16-foot fiberglass flag or my custom built satellite antenna mast. And I also upgraded the LED taillights and stoplights. Also, the satellite cable was bad in the RV, so I relocated the satellite connection to the outside of the slide out. So now it's a very short cable and it doesn't move when I put the slide in and out. I also discovered that my ground control rear jacks were too low, at least according to the Lippert installation instructions, so I raised them about 3 inches. And in the entertainment compartment, I added a DC outlet. We have a combination lock and a set of torqueless steps, and to go along with that I replaced the handbar with an extended one. My wife has a bad knee and this really helps her a lot getting up and down the steps. a tire pressure monitoring system for all the tires. And on the main door, I replaced the plastic latch with a stainless steel one. An RV Lock wireless door lock for both the baggage compartment and for the main entryway. I also upgraded the outside speakers by adding Polk PB351 drivers. And I also replaced the crank-up batwing antenna with a Winegard Razor automatic antenna. And you can just barely see the Razor antenna at the top here. Plus I have vent covers for all the vents. So now let's go inside and take a look at see what modifications I did on the interior. Starting in the bedroom, we replaced the awful mattress with a Denver mattress with an 11-inch cushion. And we replaced the full-sized 80 by 60 queen mattress with a 75 by 60 camper queen mattress. Now I'm 6'2" and I don't notice the lack of 5 inches in the mattress, but it sure is nice to be able to walk around a little easier. Also installed a flat screen TV with a custom RAM mount, and you buy just basically the components you want and assemble your own. And above the TV is the Razor antenna control panel. And it'll do a 360-degree scan of the sky and find the best signal and then point the antenna to that direction. I also put in a set of night lights. You push it once, turns blue, hold it down, turns white. And there were night lights already, but these are much nicer for reading. I replaced the bedside USB charger that the factory installed with a fast charger having an on-off switch. And one of the reasons why I selected one with an on-off switch is that I discovered the factory one was on all the time, and it drains about 20 milliamperes per hour. While 20 milliamperes doesn't seem like a lot of current, and it really isn't, it becomes additive when you have a bunch of devices all drawing small currents like that. Collectively, they can drain your battery down in just a matter of days, so it's kind of a death by 1,000 cuts. So one goal is try to minimize those standby currents by putting on-off switches in places where you can. I've also designed my own remote control system for things like lighting, the awning control, and LED strips around the coach. And I've based the control system on the cheap-to-buy 433 megahertz relays. And some of them are off the shelf, some of them have been modified, and in some cases I've done my own receiver and transmitters. It works as normal on and off, but if I go down, you'll see a light, and that light indicates that it is now under remote control. And then I can just use my transmitter, which I have here, and I can turn the lights on and off. And the 433 megahertz receiver and transmitter modules normally come as a set. And you can use them as is, which means that each device that you want to control will probably have its own remote. Or you can purchase a 16-channel remote like I show here in the center. And finally, I custom built my own transmitter because I wanted more than 16 channels. I also custom designed remote control for this hang ceiling fan. And again, this has local and remote control. And the common theme through my RV is when you see a red light, that means you have remote control. Now we will go into the bathroom, and I modified this light so that it is not only a white light, but also a blue night light. And I also modified this Max Air control to give it wireless remote. When I turn the remote on, light comes on. Again, that tells me that I can remote control it wirelessly. With it off, I cannot. And again, for boondocking purposes, I can turn off that residual load. And now we come to perhaps the most significant modification that I did, and that is this control panel. I completely customized it and redesigned it from what was there. It may be hard to see, but this is the original panel here in the center, and the outline of the original panel is here. So everything around was designed by me. And I made changes to the panel itself. This is the other sea level tank monitor that is identical to the one in the wet bay, so I can actually monitor the tank level from 2 locations. This is the on-off switch for the tank monitor. So again, I can turn the monitor off to cut down on the standby current draw of the battery if I'm going to boondock. And when I removed the original monitor panel, it had 2 functions, a DSI fault and a water pump light that were not on the new panel. So I added LEDs for the water pump and for the DSI fault so that I could replicate everything. Up here is a Victron battery management system, and it is Bluetooth capable as well, and it also has a histogram so I can look over time to see what the battery is doing. In the top center, this is a hardwired Progressive Industries electrical management system, and this is a 50 amp version. I highly recommend every RV have one. It monitors the voltage, and if the voltage goes low, which is going to be probably one of the most common issues with electrical power in a park, it'll disconnect the RV automatically so you don't damage any of your appliances or your air conditioner and those kind of things. So it actually saves the equipment in your RV. And then when it sees the voltage go back to normal, it will also turn it back on again. Next to the right is a Mopica tank check monitor. And this monitors the level of the propane tanks, and there's a module that fits underneath the bottom of the tank and ultrasonically measures the liquid content in the tank, and also has a Bluetooth function so you can do that on your phone. And this is a main receiver for my wireless system. Anytime that anybody presses a button on one of the remotes, it's recorded here, and that will kind of tell you if your kids are playing with it. But more importantly, if you're adding a new remote, then it gives you the code that that remote is transmitting, and there is a data port that you plug in with a laptop, and you can actually add the new transmitter to the system. And again, I custom designed and built the whole thing. This remote only controls the dimmer for the overhead lights in the living room, the dimmer for the strip light in the awning, and also the awning extend and retract function. However, it can see all the other activity by all the other remotes. The power switch for the remote system is here. And again, when I turn it off for boondocking, I can still use the functions of all the lighting and stuff. I just can't do it wirelessly. And similarly to how I relocated the fuse for the water pump, there was an awning light fuse buried inside this panel, which again was another dumb thing. So I transferred it to a breaker out here. And then I have a panel that controls this blue light, and basically it's a night light. Here we have the water alarm that I mentioned earlier. We can have a total of 9 sensors placed around the RV. And the sensors have to be wired, but that's not really an issue. One sensor, as I said earlier, is in the wet bay. Another sensor is in the bathroom. And the last sensor is under the sink in the kitchen. And the cycling of the LED lights shows each channel being red. And if there's a water leak, then this thing will send an alarm. Again, this is my own custom design. Then just above that, we have here custom designed dimmers that I built for the living room and the awning. There is a slide switch here that controls how much the light is dimmed. In the center position of this switch, the dimmer is off. The dimmer is on in the top position, and then it is in the auto off mode in the bottom position. The lights function normally like it would be in the on position, except that after 4 hours it will shut the lights off automatically. Originally there was on-off switch here for the ceiling light and an on-off switch here for the awning light, and you flipped it on, it turned the lights on, flipped it off, turned the lights off, just like you would expect. I replaced these with push buttons. So you push it the first time, the lights will turn on full intensity. Push it the second time, the lights now are on the dimmer, and I can adjust the brightness. Depress the third time, the lights go off. Depress it again, and the cycle repeats again. So you might think that's kind of an odd way to do it. That allows me to control the lights from my wireless remotes just by continuously pushing a button. And the last item that I designed is this battery charge monitor. And if you remember in the beginning of the video when we were in the front compartment, I told you that I had one here. They're independently reading, but they do the same function. In most RVs, and in the case of this one, we have a smart charger. And the smart charger has 3 modes: bulk, absorption, or what I call normal, and trickle. So all you have to do is look at the light, and it'll tell you where the battery charger and the battery state is. I built this cool Edison light fixture by kit bashing a couple standard fixtures, and I found a source of 12-volt Edison lights that were hard to find. And this is on its own dimmer, but the dimmer in this case is not under remote control. It's just a standard commercial dimmer. I also custom built this spotlight reading light over the easy chairs, and I 3D printed the base. I had a company custom cut the aluminum. You can turn the switch on, and then you can adjust the dimming of the lights. And again, if you go the other way, we have a red light indicating that it is under wireless remote control. I also put a dimmer for the overhead puck lights here, so they can dim them. However, this is not under remote control. I also installed a Winegard Connect 2.0 Wi-Fi and 4G hotspot, and normally you would mount it on the roof, but in my RV, the roof is made with wood rafters and plywood, and so it's transparent to RF energy. I have found maybe a 10% signal loss. I may have maybe a 95% signal strength outside, and I'll have maybe an 87% signal strength in here. Totally acceptable. The manual says 50% is the lowest you should go. And if I get in a situation where the towers are kind of far away, and I can always use my custom mast mount that mounts on my ladder, because I can connect either my satellite antenna or this device on that, so I can get that up higher even than what you would mount it on the roof. And I also replaced the interior speakers with Polk DB652s, much better than the cheap ones that they come with. And these are in the ceiling. We have another lighting remote that is located on the underside of the kitchen island where the sink is. It is a remote for the LED strip lighting around the kitchen island. And even in the daylight you can see the strip lighting under the island. And here's our skylight above the sink area, and we just got some film and put that on. And since there are not many windows on the curb side of the RV, I took the frosted window pane out and put a clear glass pane in, so that we can see outside. And when I adjust the contrast of the camera, you can see that. And I also installed battery-operated puck lights in many of the cabinets. And one press and it'll turn on. However, when I first installed them, they didn't stick very well to the ceiling, and they would always drop off when we were going down the road. So that bracket that you see, I custom designed and 3D printed it. And we put a backsplash behind the stove, and this is actually real stone. It's 1/16 of an inch stone veneer, so it doesn't weigh very much, maybe 3 pounds for the whole thing, but it sure does make it look nice. I also made a mini pantry by adding a shelf to one of the cabinets and wire baskets. Well, that wraps up my walkthrough of my 2016 Grand Design 29 RS, detailing all the modifications and customization that I did to it. If you're interested in doing any of these projects, again, go to my website, which I'll provide a link for here, and you'll see most of the projects have their own webpage and a video just for that project.